Welcome, everybody. We are glad to have you here with us today. We have some other folks registered for today's event, so we might have some people join us late. I know there were several folks who planned to catch the recording, but we are glad to have you here with us to spend the next 30 minutes to an hour together talking about our racial justice series. I am Leela Oakley. I'm the Outreach and Engagement Manager for Just Faith Ministries, and my primary work with the organization is working with folks like yourselves who are bringing our programs to their community, facilitating small groups. So again, we're glad to have you here with us today. And I'm joined by my colleague, Kristen Dollar. I'll let Kristen introduce herself, and then we're gonna begin with an opening prayer.
Yeah, hey everybody, as Lulu said, I'm Kristen, I'm the Director of Programs. My job with Just Faith Ministries is to work with people who are experts in their field, and in this case, the Racial Justice Series, Dr. Vicki Vernon-Lott and Dr. Lewis Brogdon, and many other folks to write our programs. This prayer is actually, it comes from the Faith and Racial Justice, the last program in our Racial Justice series. It's the whole program, Faith and Racial Justice, is based on, it revolves around the epistle of James, and one of the key points in James is we got to walk the talk. So I'll begin by reading this verse. It says, "My brothers and sisters, what good is it if people say they have faith, but do nothing to show it? Claiming to have faith can't save anyone, can it? Imagine a brother or sister who is naked and never has enough food to eat. What if one of you said, 'Go in peace, stay warm, have a nice meal'? What good is it if you don't actually give them what their body needs? In the same way, faith is dead when it does not result in faithful activity. We believe that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth and all that is in it. God saw what God had made and declared that it was good, very good.
We commit to caring for the earth and all that is in it, so that people of all races and nations might thrive on the land on which we depend.
We believe that God created all people in God's image, breathing into us the breath, which is our life.
We commit to honor the sacred worth of all people, ensuring that all voices are heard and that the needs of all people are represented in local and national decision-making.
We believe that when God's children wandered away from God's love, the prophets called us back home.
We commit to speaking truth even when it's risky, to challenging racist policies even when it's unpopular, to building a beloved community to challenge the status quo.
We believe that the Word became flesh to live among us, taking the form of a servant, not a king.
We commit to standing in solidarity with those who are poor and marginalized, with whom our God identifies.
We believe that our God was executed by the state as a common criminal.
We commit to demanding respect for the rights of the accused, whether in prisons, in courtrooms, or interactions with law enforcement.
We believe that the light shines in the darkness, and that the darkness cannot and will not overcome the light.
We commit to choosing love over fear, embrace over judgment, and hope over despair. We align ourselves with the invincible light of God's love, which endures even in the darkest of nights. Amen.
Amen. Thank you again, everyone, for being here. Since we have such a small group, and I really want to direct our time together today towards what your needs and your interests are, and your passions. I would love to hear a little bit, if you would be willing, just a few words about what brings you here. what brings you here to this meeting today. Would anybody be willing to share? You feel free to share out loud, but if it's more comfortable for you to share it through the chat. And I see Pat and Greg had their, Pat.
Hi. I'm a former board member of Just Faith, and I led many of the Just Faith modules when we lived in Sunnyvale. But our life has moved on, and we retired. We're in Northern California now, and we're in a Presbyterian church that's a partner with 2 other Presbyterian churches, and we've started to do some classes together because there's really 3 small churches, not enough, of a congregation in any of the 3 places. And I have been thinking in the back of my mind, I should sell Just Faith to these people.
Wow.
They don't know anything about it. And boy, racial justice is real hot here. And this is just exactly where I want to go with my life and to help others. And I haven't sent for the curriculum, although I've read about it. It looks very good. I'm anxious today to hear more about it. And I'm thinking that I will try to sell it to our people and start it here.
Yep.
We're in Benicia, California, near the San Francisco Bay. Beautiful place, nearly paradise.
Awesome. Well, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Alan Misiano from All Saints in Hayward near Benicia. And under the Diocese of Oakland, we are now jump-starting this program. And actually, there's another lady with me, Lana Craig, who couldn't be here today, but she had mentioned to me about this Zoom broadcast about how to get things started. So hopefully August we're going to have our retreat, 1-day retreat, and then promptly thereafter start the 5 or 6 week session on Zoom.
Oh, Anthony, we can't hear you. I think you're still on mute. Oh, we still can't hear you. Let me see if I can unmute you.
Mute. Okay.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. Awesome.
Fantastic. Thank you. So, hello, everybody. My name is Tony Thompson. I'm associated with Holy Family Parish here, and we're just we're northwest of Chicago, roughly 40 miles. We started putting this group together roughly 2 years ago at the point where, which was precipitated by the activities in Minnesota and George Floyd. And there were a series of like-minded people that felt very strongly that the aspect of racism and the prevalence of racism and racism as a topic seems to be what we would call the third rail when it comes to the point of discussion. And we also felt very strongly that what we need in this world, certainly in this country, is the aspect of discussion, is dialogue, and people having an opportunity to express themselves, understand, I think, gain a common understanding as to what we believe the issues are associated with racism, but more importantly, from that dialogue, being able to take action and bring others in a more or less a movement towards eradicating the aspect of racism that exists.
Great. Awesome. Good to hear.
Hi, I'm Cora Hughes, and I'm from Belleville, Illinois, which is close to St. Louis, Missouri. And I have participated in Engaging Spirituality and a couple of other things with Just Faith. And I have done racial harmony with my job. I'm a chaplain at a hospital, and we received a grant last year, and we did it for a year. And people have been really wanting to continue, but it was just a year grant. And then I thought about Just Faith and how you all have this series, and I thought it might be good to use.
Great. Thank you, Cora. And Gail or Gerald, would y'all be willing to share?
Hi, I'm Gail Mastrangelo from Cleveland, Ohio. And our parish did one of the Just Faith programs last year. And I'm decided to come today to hear about the last in the series. I've forgotten the exact name of it, but there's a strong sentiment to continue and to follow through with the last of the 3 workshops.
Oh, great. Okay. Awesome. Thank you. What about you, Gerald?
Hi, this is Jerry Hopkins, and I live in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And a friend of mine, a very new friend of mine named John Ritter, goes to my church. He's been very active in the Just Faith ministries. And through discussions with him, I thought it might be of value for me to understand more about these programs and what they have to offer, not just for me, but in an expanded role. And even while I worked in my working career for decades, I spent a lot of time focused on poverty-related issues. And now I help nonprofits who deal with poverty to create plans to become more strategic and more focused on what they are trying to accomplish. And so I do that for both churches, including the parish I belong to, which is St. Benedict the Moors in Winston-Salem. And I do it for some other poverty-related nonprofits. So I thought that this was a valuable asset. I understand that there are some dioceses in the Catholic Church that aren't happy with Just Faith ministries.
Yes.
And so I want to understand that too.
Sure. Well, we will try our best. I thank you all so much for being willing to share. I'm really grateful. It's always really energizing to be among like-minded folks who share this same passion. How many of you all are brand new to Just Faith Ministries? I was thinking there might be 1 or 2. Yeah. Okay. Well, welcome. Just a really super brief background about us. What we do is we seek to inspire and equip people to engage in social action. A lot of the time people are engaging in these programs in church or parish. Sometimes they're not. We have programs that are geared towards specifically Catholic audiences, and this particular series is ecumenical, inclusive of all denominations. And we cover a variety of topics. Today we're talking about our racial justice series, which is 3 programs. But you can see we cover a wide variety of topics as well. So, if there are other topics that are interesting to you, then I encourage you to check those out. Something to highlight, Lila, if you wouldn't mind backing up to just 1 second, we're actually working on Just Engagement, The Power to Change, which if you do end up going through the racial justice series and you really are inspired to take action and to maybe even engage in some organizing, mobilizing folks in advocacy, the racial justice series will certainly get you started in that. But we are working on revising our Just Engagement program, which will give you some even more tools for how to do that more effectively. So that way, if you decide that you do want to be involved in policy changes on a local or national level, or you really want to be involved in community development work and you feel like you need some more tools for that, that's certainly an option for after you take the racial justice series. But I just wanted to highlight that real quick because that's something that we're working on right now. Yeah, so the racial justice series as a whole, as I mentioned, it's 3 programs: Faith and Racial Equity, Exploring Power and Privilege, Faith and Racial Healing, Embracing Truth. Oh, thank you, Gail. Great question. The revisions we're looking at November, December right now is when we're tentatively planning to have the revisions ready. So we're excited about that. Our racial justice series is on equity, healing, and justice. I'll walk you through each of those programs and answer any questions that you have about that. And we recommend, these are in a small group format. sometimes it can be a little bit confusing because many organizations offer their programs in sort of like a class format where the organization facilitates that. We think that it's really important to empower local communities to build that foundation of trust within those communities. And so actually a member of your community, it can be a virtual community, which you can do it through Zoom. You can do it with folks all across the nation or on Zoom with folks just in your community, or you can do that in person. But you facilitate those programs. We recommend having at least 2 co-facilitators to facilitate those programs within your communities, and it can be a really great way, especially if you're in a church or a parish, to empower folks to take ownership of this program. We recommend 8 to 14 people, and takes place in that small group environment. So I'll just start a little on the first program in our series, which is called Faith and Racial Equity, Exploring Power and Privilege. As you can see here, the goal is to awaken folks to the economic systems and policies and cultural norms and hidden biases that empower some and oppress others. There's a story, you might have heard it by that David Foster Wallace told once, that about there's 2 small little fish swimming along in the ocean, and another big older fish swims by, and he says, "Hey boys, how's the water?" And then the little fish keeps swimming along, and a few minutes later, one little fish looks over the other and says, "What the heck is water?" We all have these norms and biases that are baked into the way that we live, the way that we see the world. And so the first part of this program really seeks to help participants open their eyes to the water in which we are swimming, that we're not even aware that we're swimming in. And then the second half of this program gets into some of those specific, the ways that the specific ways in which these norms and biases and policies manifest themselves. Lila, if you'll go to the next slide, some of those topics include, you'll see in session 5, there's a deep dive into the education systems and how those policies play out, how that plays out in media, how it plays out in our criminal justice series, which this is a little introduction here in this particular program. And then our third program, we do a deeper dive into this important topic. Take action based on what you've learned in this program, both on a personal level and as a group. A lot of times, I know that a lot of you are doing this in churches. One of the common action steps that groups will take first is to create a committee within the parish, or a team that will be focused on anti-racism and dismantling racism, both within their parish and also doing that outside the parish as well. So there are so many things I could say about the details of what is covered in each of these sessions. I'm wondering if you all have any specific questions, though, about faith and racial equity, exploring power and privilege.
I do.
Yeah, Gail, go on ahead. I think there might be a chance that Kristen, looks like her internet might be going in and out, but Gail, feel free to go ahead and ask your question.
Okay. Our group began in the middle with the series that we're going to look at in a few minutes. Of course, when I see this, I think, oh my gosh, I got to do this one too. You know what I mean? There's just so much that we don't know about. That, we just don't realize, you just can't learn enough. I mean, it's just so much to know in order to really be aware and to be sensitive. So, I feel like saying, sign me up for this, because these things are so powerful. I have to say to the others, the second series that Kristen will be telling us about, it was so profound. We were all in our group, a group of 10, just overwhelmed with material, with the discussion. And we had a real faithful turnout in person. And when they couldn't come, we had them come on Zoom with the rest of us in person. So just to say that as a witness, you just can't learn enough.
Thank you so much, Gail. That's really, really great to hear.
So quick question here, Kristen, this is Tony. Of these programs, is there a recommended sequence, or is it in fact driven by the interest as it pertains to the respective group?
Fantastic question. Yes. We recommend taking either Faith and Racial Equity, which is this program right here, or Faith and Racial Healing, which I'll talk about in just a second, taking either one of those first. It kind of depends on the interests of your group. Faith and Racial Healing, as I'll talk about, discusses the history of racism in the United States. And this one is on the norms and biases that shape our interactions with one another and shape our systems too. So it really kind of depends. Either one of those is great. It kind of depends on the interest of your group.
Okay.
But we do recommend taking one of these two before taking the final program, Faith and Racial Justice. It's really important to have that foundation. And if possible, take all three.
Okay, thank you.
And Pat, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, great.
I guess I'm a little confused. So there's 3 different choices.
Yes.
How long are each of them? This one we're looking at right now looks like 8 sessions. How many sessions are the other 2?
Yes, the good question too. So they're all 8 regular sessions plus a retreat, which is 3 hours for virtually or 6 hours for in person. And an immersion experience. So usually for most groups, each program will take about 10 weeks. All right.
A long program.
Great, big commitment.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And I think we will keep moving on. We will answer some of these, some of the commonly asked questions here at the end too. So the next program is called Faith and Racial Healing, Embracing Truth, Justice, and Restoration. And as I mentioned, this program guides participants in telling the truth about the history of racism in the United States so that we can work towards true reconciliation with God and restoration towards one another. One important theological theme running throughout this program is this element of confession before we come to the communion table. It's important to confess, on an individual and on a communal level, what we have done and left undone, so that we can have true love of God and neighbor. And also, it's really important in order to dismantle these systems of racial injustice, we first have to understand how they were constructed in the first place, so that we can effectively dismantle them. So that's a little bit about the premise of why we wrote this. And you can see some of the topics that are covered throughout this program. Some of the spiritual foundation is that each session begins with a spiritual, often a spiritual that was sung in the times of slavery, and there's a biblical reflection around that. There's some really deep, profound theology in the spirituals. So that's a really big, that's a really important part of this program. And we also read 40 Days of Prayer, which I'll talk about books for all of the programs here in a few minutes, but 40 Days of Prayer is a collection of, it starts out with a narrative from people who were enslaved, and it walks you through a prayer and a reflection process, and participants read one of them each week. But you can see how here throughout the program, it narrates the history of racism in the United States. It begins before in Africa, before enslavement occurred, and it ends up around the civil rights period, because the third program will kind of pick up there after civil rights. Something important to note is that for a few different reasons, we decided to focus on the history and the experience of enslaved people from Africa and their descendants in America. And we did that for several reasons. One of them is because we believe that understanding this history is foundational to understanding racism in general and how racism affects other communities of color as well. We were also writing this program at a time when there was finally outpouring of interest in this particular topic. And so we really wanted to follow the energy of folks who are really wanting to learn about this particular expression of racism. And finally, we do expect, and we have heard that folks do find knowing about this particular side of history, then it is helpful in understanding how racism operates in general, and how it affects other communities that have experienced marginalization as well. And then finally, Faith and Racial Justice, Changing Systems and Structures is the third program in the Racial Justice series, and it invites participants to formulate their own responses to racism in their churches, workplaces, and communities, and really develop a solid plan of action. In each program, session 8 will have an opportunity to discuss those action steps, but this program is an opportunity to really solidify that and understand how structural and institutional racism operates today. We begin with discussing the wealth gap, move into redlining. We talk about some of the effects of mass incarceration, and how churches and individuals can come alongside folks who have experienced incarceration. We talk about reparations, and we spend a lot of time on criminal justice reform. And finally, there's the commitment to action, which is really woven throughout. This entire program is really a process of discerning how exactly we are called as individuals and as a group to engage in dismantling racial injustice in our communities. Here you can see all the books that are read throughout each of the programs. We also include a lot of other resources, including YouTube videos and TED Talks and articles, some podcasts. But the books are really like a lot of the core of the reading that occurs between sessions. And we also include in between sessions spiritual practices in which participants can spiritually and emotionally process this type of information that they are learning and discussing. And now I'll turn it over to Leila to tell you a little bit what more you can expect during each session.
Thanks, Kristen. So as Kristen said, each of these programs is 8 sessions plus an opening retreat and an immersion experience. So that is 10 total gatherings with your small group. Those gatherings can be done over the course of 8 weeks. Oftentimes communities will choose to expand that to 10 weeks. So that very first meeting is the opening retreat. And then when you get to the immersion experience, you take that on as a meeting itself, as its own week. There are groups who choose to condense that and do it within 8, but most choose 10. I heard someone say, that's a big commitment, and you're exactly right. Our programs take buy-in, they take commitment, they take being willing to show up week after week and be present to process and share with your group, as well as contributing time and energy to the weekly assignments, to reading that has been assigned for the week, watching videos or whatever it might be assigned for that week. And so it is no small task to take one of our programs, but we believe that it is really important work. This learning and the learning being done in community with one another is really important and ultimately leads to opportunity for transformation and for action around these issues. Each of the programs has an opening retreat. There's a virtual and an in-person version that can be used to gather folks together, a time to get to know one another better, to build a sense of connection and community, as well as to dive into the program material and have some time for honest self-reflection and sharing. The immersion experience is a time for the small group to engage in the community. It might be partnering with a nonprofit or a local organizing group who's already doing work around these issues in your community to build a bridge for action and connection, as participants move out from a program and explore ways to get involved. Our programs are designed for small groups. We say 7 to 14 individuals, including the 2 facilitators. There are groups that are a little bit larger or a little bit smaller, but we found that's kind of the most ideal range. And if you're meeting virtually, we found that even a little bit of a smaller group, 7 to 12 individuals, works best. If you are in a church community, or you're within a nonprofit organization or a larger collective that's going to do the program, you can always run small groups at the same time. So you can have a larger group of, let's say, 30 people going through the program, but in multiple small groups, so that they're able to still experience the program within a tight-knit community where there's time and space to really share and be vulnerable with one another. The program material will come to you in a virtual and an in-person format. So you can meet via Zoom, or you can meet in the same classroom. And if you need to, you'll have the ability to practice some flexibility. So if you choose to meet in person, and then for whatever reason, COVID related or otherwise, you need to move to a virtual setting, you'll have access to that material and can make that shift as needed. And then we've already spoken about the weekly assignments, but I'll add a note that on average, those assignments take about an hour to an hour and a half to complete each week, depending on the individual and how quickly one processes information, and really just the time that they have to allot to it. So you can expect about an hour to an hour and a half commitment between each session. All of our sessions are a little bit different. So the outline of what you're going to be doing in each session will have its own form, but you can generally expect to see an opening and closing prayer. 2 main times for dialogue. One's going to be centered around a video or an activity that's done in session that will generate new ideas and new conversation. Another time of dialogue will be around the readings and the weekly assignments. So you have time to process what you learned throughout the week with your small group, and share your own learnings, but also to hear the wisdom that was gleaned by your fellow participants in your group. You can register for our programs at justfaith.org. They are $250 per program. And that allows you to have access to the program materials for 1 calendar year. And your organization can run multiple small groups under that one registration fee. So again, if you find yourself in a church that's interested in doing faith and racial equity, and there are 30 people who want to do the program, you just have to register for the program once, and then you can run 2 or 3 or 4 small groups within that calendar year. The only additional cost is the cost of books per participant, which are on average about $30 to $40, depending on the program. And that's if you choose to order through us, which we always appreciate, but is not required. There is one other additional fee, and I think it's in faith and racial equity for a documentary. And Kristen, you can correct me if I'm wrong. There's one time where folks will be asked to view a documentary, and it's about $2 to do that. So there is that one small additional fee, but besides that, it's just the cost of books. Once you've registered for the program, you'll immediately get access to the material and can begin diving into the program content. You can decide how you want to offer it, whether that's virtual or in person. Then becomes the fun work of deciding who's going to be a co-facilitator. Likely, if you're on this call, you might be one of those people. These are leaders who will lead small groups. We encourage groups to have 2 co-facilitators assigned to each group, so that they can work in partnership with one another to lead the small group experience. We provide facilitators with every bit of material that they need to be successful in that role, including facilitator training on demand, or we offer those on a bi-monthly basis. And then we also offer Zoom support for those of you who want to navigate leading virtual small groups. And then becomes the fun job, which is extending the invitation to participate in the small group experience. For each of these programs in the series, there is a promotion toolkit, which will give you like social media posts, email announcement texts, anything that you would need to spread the word about this opportunity and invite people in. But I will kind of add a tip, which is the most effective promotion tool, whether that is recruiting a co-facilitator, or recruiting people to join in as participants is a one-on-one ask. More often than not, we're willing to say yes to something new or challenging or kind of unknown if someone we trust and respect invites us to that journey. So it's sometimes a good idea for folks like yourselves to gather a couple other people who are bought in and are interested in taking part in the journey. And then each of you going out into your targeted audience, so whether that's your church or your local city, and extending the invitation from there. So with that said, we will go ahead, stop sharing, and Kristen, I'll throw it over to you if you have any other comments or thoughts, and then we can open it up for general questions.
That's all I got. And I see Greg has a question for us.
All right. I'm wondering if this is mostly by Zoom, does that mean that churches from a wider area than, say, a neighboring city could participate, like someone hundreds of miles away could still participate if it's all by Zoom, correct?
Absolutely. So, Greg, we've had, I'll give you an example. We've had a family take actually the racial justice series. So they really wanted to explore this topic as a family, and they have family members all over the country. And I think about 15 of them went through it together. So that can be done as a family unit. It can be done as a congregations partnering together that are geographically set apart. It really doesn't matter as long as you have the ability to hop on Zoom and have access to that technology. You can extend the invitation.
Good to know.
Yeah, Pat.
This is sort of a blunt question perhaps, but this is a real white community. It really bugs me. We came from a really racially, ethnically mixed community in San Jose, California, where we used to live. But when we retired up here, it's all white people. And that mostly white people. And that's really a problem when it comes to this topic, I think. I mean, it's at least it's a concern because I wish we were more ethnically diverse. And I'm thinking I might be able to stack the deck a bit and get some more racially diverse people to participate in this if they were out of the area. Would that be okay? I mean, is that even a concern?
Sure, that's a good.
Should the groups be more corrugated, or is it okay if they're less diverse?
This is a really good question, Pat. We had this conversation a lot as we were developing the program. We asked people who had been doing racial equity consulting for years and years. And the consensus was that it is really important that white folks, that we do our work. We have the responsibility to dismantle these structures that white folks put in place. And so what we did was we worked with people of color who are our consultants to put together materials that speak to perspectives that voice perspectives coming from people of color through the reading materials, through the videos, through podcasts, and also through the wisdom of our consultants. A lot of times within groups, if you do have a more diverse group, one of the things that we really warn against is putting people of color in the position of having to be the teachers or having to speak to the experience of all people of their particular race. And that can be a lot of pressure. It can also be a bit traumatic and emotionally draining. So long story short, this program really is for if you have an all-white group, this is a program for you. I will say, we have had, just to be, share a little bit about the experience of people of color and more diverse groups. We have had folks who have repeatedly said that they have felt affirmed by the materials and the conversations. And I'm thinking of one particular person who said that they felt that it was really a relief to not feel alone in what they were experiencing in the world. At the same time, this can be really difficult to be in a group with white folks who are wrestling with these questions for the first time. And so I really leave it up to folks to discern for themselves whether this is something that they feel called to do if they are a part of a more diverse group and they are a person of color.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
Years ago, when I was very deeply involved in Just Faith, I'm a former teacher, and I felt that Just Faith programs in general, and maybe this is not true anymore, but it seemed to me that the Just Faith programs were geared to very educated people. And I in those days, we involved some homeless people and some other people, random people, and on different economic planes in Just Faith classes, which was fabulous, but some of the people couldn't participate really. They couldn't do the reading, and they couldn't really hold up their end of the discussion sometimes. Is this more egalitarian, or is it also geared to highly educated people?
I will say there is a lot of reading in this program. I mean, it's one of many ways of learning about racial justice. There is a lot of reading. There is also, there are also videos that folks can watch. And so it does require, honestly, like it really does require that you have access to the internet, which is in itself like a huge privilege. So yeah, I mean, I would say that that folks would need to have the time, the privilege of having the time to engage in those readings and conversations, and they would, in order to fully participate in the conversations, they probably would need to engage in the readings as well. So yeah, but you're absolutely right. And that is something too, Pat, that we are exploring, or like other ways of learning that don't involve don't require reading books, and don't require quite as much of a time commitment. Thank you. Excellent point. Tony, yes.
Yeah, question with respect to, I guess it's a twofold question or two-part question. One, how long have these programs been in place? Mm-hmm. And two, what's been the experience, assuming that you've had some experience with it and some feedback with regard to the programs, what's been the experience in terms of people's consistency? We talk about 8 sessions and their inclination to be with the program from start to finish, or perhaps said another way, what's the dropout rate?
Yeah.
Yeah, great question. Kristen, do you want to talk about the first part of that question? And I can tackle the second, so you can tell them when the programs were released.
Sure. Yeah. So we began writing Faith and Racial Equity the spring of 2019. And it's gone through some revisions since then. We continue to, I can't say exactly the dates of when they were released. I know that the final program was, we had just written it when, during the murder of George Floyd. So it was all, I think 2019, 2020 was when these programs were written. So we've had enough time to get a good bit of feedback and implement people's, suggestions into the programs.
As far as kind of the retention rate, Tony, part of our challenge is we don't have access to that information unless people share it with us. You could register for our program tomorrow and fill out the registration information, and then we could never hear from you. We do ask and request people to fill out pre-program surveys and post-program surveys, but the numbers on those have always been lower than we'd like. It's never fun to do a survey, so we understand that. But this is my plug to say, please do fill out a survey. We take your feedback seriously. That is what we use to rewrite and work on our programs. But that aside, I really can only give you information based on kind of my anecdotal feedback that I've received from facilitators, which is that there seems to be on average about one person who drops off from every small group. And not just because of it's not always an issue with the program material or an issue with the small group, but just the challenges that come up with life over the course of 2 months. Someone getting sick, someone changing jobs, those sorts of details. So I would say for a group of 12, that there's usually one person that isn't able to make it through the entire series. But by and large, the anecdotal feedback I've received from facilitators has been very positive, and that there really is a deep commitment once people get into the program material to show up each week and stay connected and engaged.
Sure, Pat. Oh, go ahead, Pat.
I'm involved with a group here, which I think is a national group called SURGE, which stands for Showing Up for Racial Justice. And it seems real similar. So they have this terrific class. As a former teacher, I can say that this is the most terrific class I've ever taken, was their study in action class that I took last summer. The trouble with it, though, it is really good, and it's on the same hits a lot of these same notes. But the one thing that it doesn't do, of course, is bring in the faith component. And so I feel like that's missing for me, and I think it would be missing for my fellow church colleagues. So rather than push SURGE, I'd rather push this, or promote this, not push. So anyway, do you know about SURGE? Or maybe
I do. So funny story, I'm involved in SURGE too. And I didn't know this. I've been involved in SURGE for a while. And I was talking to just someone who I happened to go canvassing with a couple weeks ago. And it turns out she's the founder of SURGE here and it started here in Louisville. And they actually began their first meeting space is really in the Just Faith Ministries offices. So I thought that was pretty cool. But they actually do have a faith-based, I don't know if it's just centered to Louisville or not, but they do have a faith-based group in SURGE that meets. But I will say, I do talk, and I collaborate with the SURGE folks. I'm working with them right now on the Just Engagement process. And I really feel that our work can be, I feel that we can be really good collaborators with one another, because we can do a lot of the education work and they do a lot of the action work. And then when people need more education, they can come back to us, and so on and so forth. So our staff has been really involved in SURGE since many of our staff members have been very involved in SURGE.
I'm glad to hear that. They also, at least here, they have tons of actions.
Mm-hmm.
So many actions that it just makes my head swim. And almost no one here could participate in everything unless they didn't have any other life. But
Sure.
It's impressive, though, that they've thought of a bunch of different ways to attack the issue of white privilege and white stuff that's not good, and it seems very effective.
Yes, absolutely. And Cora, I'm sorry, I think you might have had your hand up for a while.
I'm not sure how to ask this question. Have you found that you have more white groups taking it than African American groups, or do you have diverse groups? And I ask this because when we did the one that we got the grant for, the grant required that we have it diverse, that we have both Blacks and whites. And I'm thinking, if I do this with Just Faith, I was thinking more of the people from the church or the community, but that's not necessarily diverse. So is it better, or do you know if it's better if the group is diverse, or if it's all white, or if it's all Black?
Sure. I will say there is a richness of experience that is added when you do have a more diverse group. And, at the same time, it is really important that people of color know if they are going to be a part of a more diverse group, that they know that they will likely be with white folks who are wrestling with the issue. And as they're wrestling with these issues, it can happen that folks will say things that are hurtful. So it is really important that folks know that going into this process. But that said, we have had, and Leela, you can speak to this, we have had many diverse groups who have gone through our program, and we've generally gotten really good feedback. So I wouldn't say that there's you should only do it if you have a diverse group, or you should only do it if you have a white group. Both options are great.
Yeah, I would second that. I think I would just reiterate again the point that Kristen made, which is true of whoever you're speaking to. When you're promoting one of our programs, you want to make sure people really know what they're saying yes to. There's nothing worse than saying yes to something and then feel like you got tricked into an experience you weren't ready for. And I think that's particularly relevant when you are extending an invitation to a person of color, particularly if you're a white facilitator inviting a person of color to be a part of the group, that they know what they're going to show up to when they enter into the small group experience, what the content of the material is, who else is choosing to participate. And that advice goes beyond just issues around the makeup of the group. But I think that goes into, when you're promoting, letting people know actually how many gatherings there are, or what kind of weekly assignment and commitments there are, just so people are ready to say yes when they actually have the space in their lives to join in on the experience.
Good.
Any other questions? Yeah, Gail.
I was just going to mention that we did a weekly meeting for 8 weeks, and it was very intense. It was very profound, but this time around we have a suggestion to do like twice a month, to meet every other week, coming from the group. So this will be something that we are seriously considering. So we're just going to, I think it's because of the amount of reading and homework. And as you mentioned, everybody has a life that's going on, regardless of what we really want to learn more about. So we'll see how it works out. We're going to try the every other week this time.
Gail, I'm glad you shared that, because we have a lot of groups who are choosing to do that. That seems to be a more manageable commitment for folks. And I think every other week is a great cycle. When you start extending the meeting times to 3 or 4 weeks between sessions, I do think your group will lose a little bit of steam. You kind of have to spend the first 20 minutes of being together, familiarizing yourself with one another again, before you can really get into the material and be open to sharing again. So I think that every other week or twice a month can work just as effectively as every week.
Thanks. Also, Gerald, I wanted to ask Gerald Hopkins what he meant about the church and the program. You had asked a question way back at the beginning of the hour.
Well, I learned about this Just Faith Ministries through a friend who is involved and is a group led groups and that kind of thing. And he made the comment that the bishop in Charlotte shut down the Just Faith Ministry support. And I went, wow. And that's as much as I know.
So the financing, the paying for the program, is that what you mean?
Or support in any way, like even using facilities to meet in person, things like that.
Our diocese promotes it.
Yeah, well, we, as fellow Catholics, we know there's some diversity within our church.
Yeah, what I'll say to that, I mean, there's a lot that could be said, but what I feel comfortable saying is that the USCCB has reviewed and approved our Catholic programming. So the Just Faith Catholic series and Good News People are 2 Catholic programs. That does not mean that every diocese promotes and uses those programs, but they have been approved by the USCCB. Our ecumenical programs, including this series, have not been reviewed and approved in the same way because they're designed for an ecumenical audience. But also, as this screen of faces can show, that there are Catholic dioceses and parishes across the country that are utilizing this series and promoting it. So it sort of depends where you're located and the leadership in that area. But I just want to let you know that those Catholic programs have been reviewed and approved by USCCB.
Thank you.
Well, I want to let you all know that I'm going to reach out via email tomorrow with a recording from today's presentation, as well as a PDF of the slides that we shared. So you can pass those along as that's helpful to anyone who you think might want to learn a little bit more about our program. And that will come directly from my email, and I'll include my phone number. So if you have more questions, if you want to talk about one of these programs in greater depth, or just more about Just Faith Ministries in general, I'd be happy to connect with you and speak further. And if you're interested in being a facilitator and want to learn more about what that might look like, we'll have 2 trainings in July, and I'll include a link about those in the follow-up email, so you can learn more about what you'd be saying yes to if you choose to facilitate one of our programs.
Is there a book on Just Faith Ministries?
Great question. There is not a book, but we do have some, beyond just our website, we have a few other materials that I think would give you a better idea of who we are. So I will make a note to email you directly with a few of those, so you can just get to know us as an organization a little better.
That'd be great, because I've actually read half the books on the list already prior to this, or knowing about it. So I was sort of interested with the reading list.
Right. Okay. Well, wonderful. Any final question? All right. Thank you for joining us. Oh, one more. Yeah.
Sorry, just one. Would there be a possibility that Jack could give some sort of a introductory talk? My experience with Jack over the years was that Jack was the salesman, and he always nailed it for me and for all the people that I was trying to do outreach for. So.
Great question. So for those of you who don't know, Jack Jezreel is our founder, and he is on staff and primarily works with our network, which is something that I can tell you about more another day, but it's basically a way that we continue to provide resources and training for our program graduates in the larger community. But he also does virtual speaking engagements. He used to travel to different cities and introduce our programs, and now does that virtually. And so that's definitely an option. If you, for example, have a church community or a couple churches that you'd like to introduce Just Faith Ministries or one program in particular, we can talk more about that possibility, and he'd definitely be open to it. So just reply back to me, Pat, when you get my email, and we can go from there. And if that's interesting to anyone else, you can do the same. All righty. Well, thank you for spending the last hour with us. It's good to get to know each of you. Thank you for your interest in this.
This was wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
Good. We'll be in touch, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
You too.
Great. Thanks.
Bye.